We joined the debate shortly into Malachi O'Doherty's opening speech in proposition of the motion.
Poisonous, or that all religion has damaged Ireland, right? And I don't know how anyone can make the case that some of it hasn't. There are many religious people and even religious institutions in Ireland which no doubt do fine and wonderful things and have had no baneful effect, and the private person engaged in private prayer in their own bedroom, whatever it is they're praying for, is having no particular impact on politics at all. But can we say that no religious ideas and influences within our political culture were damaging and destructive? Because that's what you have to say to refute this motion. At the inception of the Irish state, we have a foundational myth that is founded on blood sacrifice and martyrdom. We have a national mythology, if you like, in the island, certainly in the Irish Republic, which maps the Christian message onto a political message, in which at the very start we have the champions, if you like, of nationhood, defined as martyrs, defined almost as Christ-like figures, to such an extent that there's almost a confusion in the Catholic Christian nationalist Republican mind, or at least there was until very recently, between political martyrdom and religious martyrdom. And I think that is a poisonous influence from the very start. But if you look at the very determination of De Valera, that Ireland should be not only Catholic but Gaelic as well, not only Gaelic but Catholic as well, and if you look at the conspiracy that he hatched with that arch-fascist John Charles McQuaid to define the special position of the Catholic Church within the Constitution of Ireland. And if you look at the outworking of that, for instance, in the opposition to the Mother and Child Bill, where the Catholic Church sought to determine, and nearly successfully determined, that there should be no state welfare for children, because that was the God-given task of the mother tied to the kitchen sink. And if you look at the unfolding of the Irish political life and the influence of the Catholic Church over that, with the banning of contraception, the banning of abortion, virtually the criminalisation of sexual activity, and the sneering and the near criminalisation of intermarriage between Catholic and Protestant. You cannot say that wasn't religion having a poisonous effect within the political sphere. And then if you look to the north, you have the retention of, certainly in the early generations of the state, of a Catholic theology infusing the Republican and nationalist notions to the extent that you almost have vitriolic anti-Semitism. You have, within nationalism, you have the Orange Order dictating that the government ministers in the Stormont Parliament would stand down. We'd lost a Minister of Education, I believe, in 1968, Phelim O'Neill. Why? Because he went to a Catholic Mass, a funeral. And that isn't the poisoning of politics by religion. Of course it is. So I ask you to look at this motion with the clear eyes of sensible people who know fine rightly that it's as plain as the nose in my face that religion has poisoned politics in Ireland, and have a little bit of pity for my dear Christian friends who are going to try futilely to argue to the contrary. Thank you very much. Cut amongst your Christian friends? You do?
I do? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
What church were you baptized in?
Thank you.
What church were you baptized in?
I'll begin, as I always do, with the joke. Harry Goldberg had been elected the next president of Ireland, the first Jewish boy to reach that office. He was very proud, and he phones his mother to invite her to the inauguration. And he says, "Mama, guess what? I've just been elected president. Won't you come to the inauguration?" His mummy replies, "Oi, Harry, you know I hate trains. I can't face the journey all the way to Dublin. Maybe next time." Harry says, "But Mama, there's no need to take a train. I'll send the presidential limousine to collect you. The journey will only be half an hour. Come to my inauguration, please." His mother says, "Listen, Harry, I hate hotels. There's no kosher food. Maybe next time." And Harry pleads, "Mama, you'll stay in the Aras Nuchtaron with a kosher chef to yourself. Please come." And so his mama still complains, "Oi, Harry, I have nothing to wear." So Harry says, "I'll have somebody take you to Brown Thomas to make you look perfect. You must come." And so his mother finally relents, and she says, "Okay, I suppose I'll come." So the inauguration day arrives, and Mama's seated in the front row next to the Taoiseach. And Harry's called up to take his oath as the president. And the Mama digs Taoiseach in the side and says, "Hey, you see that boy, Harry? His brother's a very successful doctor." Now, that joke has some very important home truths in it about what stereotypically Jewish people have seen as a good profession. In fact, if you look at the jobs that Jewish people have gravitated towards here in Ireland, you'll find doctors, lawyers, accountants, academics, theatre people, business people, but very few politicians. Now, we did have some notable ones, such as Sir Otto Jaffa. He was lavishly charitable. He was the largest linen exporter in Ireland. He was a member of the Irish Unionist Party, and he was Lord Mayor of Belfast on 2 occasions between 1899 and 1904. In Dublin, Robert Briscoe was a TD from 1927 to 1969. He was active in the IRA and Sinn Féin during the War of Independence, and he was sent by Michael Collins abroad to procure arms. And he too had a successful political career, as did his son and his grandson, who both served as Lord Mayors of Dublin. The Jaffas and the Briscoes were, of course, individuals, but they're all committed Jews, and they all believed that their religion provided them with the principles that they could evoke in political life. Now, Jewish ethics has a good deal to say about politics. The 12th century scholar Maimonides believed that a political leader should live among the masses. He or she should be able to understand their world and explain things to them in concrete, tangible terms. And such leaders, he says, should also be endowed with a strong imaginative faculty in order to judge reality effectively and develop solutions that the electorate can achieve as their objectives. He also says that leaders should suppress their desires for victory and honor. And Judaism believes that in the integrity and worth of each and every individual human being. But of course, we're social beings, and by nature we seek to form communities. So people are, Jews believe, bound into a social contract, so that while we're free and independent, we voluntarily trade a portion of our autonomy for a measure of collective security. So this means that the needs of the community sometimes outweigh the needs of the individual. And the individual sometimes concedes a personal right in favor of an obligation, what in Hebrew is called a mitzvah. So rights and obligations, they operate in tandem. One without the other produces uncertainty and even chaos. Now, this ethical standpoint has important implications for the proposition under consideration. It's not religion per se which adversely affects politics on this island. There have no doubt been difficulties, which my friends on the other side will raise, but these relate to the breaking of the bonds of solidarity between individuals and their community. So the fault perhaps lies with individuals who have failed to understand the word and the will of the people, and they've acted unilaterally, sometimes using punishment, coercion, and even violence, all in the name of religion, to achieve their ends. And rather than adhering to the essential precepts or ethical postures of the faiths to which they belong. And there's also no doubt that there are individuals who have been true to the principles of their faiths and have drawn strength from them in order to affect their politics positively. And perhaps the best that can be expected from politicians or from political activists who profess religious faith is for them to balance rights and responsibilities more carefully, to value reason over passion, to approach those they represent with sympathy, and to present them with imaginative solutions to the challenges we face in these difficult times. Thank you.
Michael? Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. And when I came in, the first thing I saw was a poster for the debate. And just after it said, "Religion has poisoned politics on this island," somebody had handwritten, especially Teagues. And I thought, well, that's the debate one. Exhibit 1. And of course, politics has poisoned, or religion has poisoned politics, and indeed politics has poisoned religion, because they shouldn't be interacting with each other. Religion is essentially about personal beliefs, about what you believe the creator of the universe is telling you about how you should lead your life and the afterlife. Now, because different people have different subjective beliefs on this issue, and because everybody has the right to hold their beliefs and to manifest their beliefs about the supernatural and about religion, and because there are so many different beliefs, the only way that everybody's right can be equally respected is for politics to stay out of the supernatural and out of religious, personal, theological beliefs. The state must remain strictly neutral on these issues. And once politics is involved with the state, or once politics is influenced by religious views, that neutrality is broken. We've had it particularly, in the Republic of Ireland from the foundation of the state, when our first film censor announced that his policy on censoring films was, "I know nothing about films, but I do know the 10 Commandments," through to our constitution in the 1930s, which was more or less written by the Catholic hierarchy, possibly proofread by Eamon de Valera, who knows, but it includes the extraordinary claim within it that the state acknowledges that the homage of public worship is due to Almighty God. Now, if you think about that for a second, that's not even acknowledging the right of citizens to worship a God. It's acknowledging the right of the God to be worshipped by the citizens. Now, if there is a creature that has created a universe of 100 billion galaxies, each of which contains 100 billion stars like our sun, around which there are many planets revolving, the idea that he would need his rights upheld by Eamon de Valera and John Charles McQuaid seems slightly absurd. If you move on to the Noel Brown's mother and child scheme in the 50s, the John McGahern case in the 60s, there's loads of cases where people's rights have been explicitly infringed by religious influence in the political sphere. You have of course the obsession with the Roman Catholic Church with sexual morality and the control of education are the two main things that they've been obsessed with, particularly in the Republic of Ireland. Although the sexual morality thing has also spread to Northern Ireland, where in the 1970s, when the IRA were using condoms as part of the timing mechanisms of their bombs as a protective measure, and some IRA members were opposed to the use of condoms on moral grounds, through to Charlie Haughey and his Irish solution to an Irish problem, where he passed a law saying that condoms would be available in the Republic of Ireland, but only if you had a doctor's prescription saying that you were married and you needed them for bona fide family planning purposes. You had up as far as the 80s. I remember after the 80s there was a great cartoon after the first divorce referendum was defeated in Ireland. So divorce was still unconstitutional in the Republic of Ireland. And it was around the time of the Anglo-Irish Agreement and the protests up here. And Martin Turner had a cartoon on the front page of the Irish Times of a unionist stereotype with the sort of the bowler hat and the sash, and a sort of paddy character with Wellington boots and a cap, and they were sort of standing beside each other with arms around each other, facing into camera, so to speak. And the Ulster unionist cartoon character had a big rosette on him saying Ulster says no, and the paddy character had a big rosette on him saying so does Munster, Leinster and Connacht. And that, I think, it sort of encapsulates the strangulating influence of religious beliefs and the interaction between religious beliefs and sort of nationalist or loyalist or unionist or republican beliefs on politics in Ireland. My favourite example of that actually was back in the 90s when there was a football match in Ireland, in Lansdowne Road, between Ireland and Denmark, and the Irish Celtic fans who boo Glasgow Rangers players even when they're playing for international teams, decided they would boo Peter Lovenkrantz when he came on for Denmark as a substitute, and continued booing him incessantly for about 20 minutes, not realising that it was actually Peter Madsen of Brøndby, who had nothing to do with the Irish conflict and was bemused as to why he was being booed for sectarian reasons by Irish Celtic fans. But the last thing that I would say, which is probably the most important example of the poisoning of politics in Ireland by the Roman Catholic Church in particular, through their pretend state in the Vatican and through their hierarchy on the island, is the recent exposure of the child sexual abuse cover-ups for decades, where they had priests raping and abusing children, where the hierarchy had been covering up, and where the state had been acquiescing in that because of the poisoning of Irish politics by religion. It's only recently that Atheist Ireland has been founded as an organisation, both to promote reason and atheism over superstition and supernaturalism, but also to promote a secular state where everybody has the right to believe what they want religiously, but where the state stays strictly neutral and does not take any sides on religious issues, and in particular removes the control of education from the Roman Catholic Church. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Reverend Hudson.
We'll do this. Thank you, Malachi. God bless you, Malachi. All I can say to begin with is shame on the Humanist Society. I think it's an impossible task to ask anybody to stand here tonight and to struggle to make the argument that clearly identifies religion as the worm in the heart of the beautiful flower that was Irish politics. You would laugh at their audacity, yet you'd expect that these three goodly, humble men, Malachi, Michael and John, should stand up here and try to do the impossible. As you already have seen, Malachi added an amendment and Michael talked mostly about football. Let me explain the point I'm making. This proposal that religion has poisoned politics on this island is far too general and not specific. It would be rejected from the conference floor of the most modest trade union gathering because of its inability to explain what religion and what politics, which religion and which politics. So I assume we are supposed to accept here tonight that the absolute influence of the Catholic Church in the political life of the Irish Republic is the same as the legacy of the Reverend Francis Hutcheson from Saintfield, the father of the Scottish Enlightenment, the mentor of Adam Smith, who gave us our contemporary society, is poisonous to political life. And that there was no difference between the strident early voice of Dr. Ian Kyle Paisley and the gentle voice of Quakers who are both pacifists and peacemakers. What nonsense. Or the First Presbyterian Church on Rosemary Street in Belfast that before anybody else stood up against slavery and had the impertinence to interfere with the secular market forces of Belfast City by disallowing Belfast to be the only city in the then United Kingdom to support and trade in slavery. That was a gross interference by Christian gentlemen in the wonderful soft politics of Ireland. I almost agree with Richard Dawkins about the evil of religion has caused, and the endemic inhumanity of religious power, and the irrational way so many try to justify the unjustifiable and the unprovable. But to suggest, dear friends, that politics is only diminished by the involvement of religion in the body politic is as absolutely bizarre and every bit as fundamentalist as the most craziest evangelical that you would meet. Look at how impossible we humans are. So convinced we are right and everyone else is wrong. How easy it is to disengage, despise and hate each other. Whether you're atheist or whether you're religious. Humans are programmed to protect their patches, physical and intellectual. Religion has slaughtered each other in large numbers. Atheists have slaughtered each other as well. Most societies have evolved out of a single dominant religion and culture. In such societies, newcomers are severely disadvantaged and often alienated. A pluralist approach, where all bring their ideas to the public space with no dominant political or religious ideology, seems to me the most intelligent. And an attempt to force religion only into the personal space and out of the public space of ideas is every bit as totalitarian as the Soviet Union. I'll finish up. Religion has not been a good experience for many people, it is true, in many, many cases throughout this island. But to see that it has no positive influence is ridiculous. Wilberforce, with his Christian beliefs, interfering with the politics of Britain and Ireland, advocating the abolishment of slavery. The common legend that the British Labour Party owed more to Methodism than Marxism, which gave us universal health care. This has nothing to do with your personal belief. But could you really expect that the voices of Bishop Edward Daly, Gordon Wilson, and Father Dennis Fogg, 3 good Christian men, were poisonous to the politics here in Northern Ireland? And more to the point, and on a personal note, and other religions can defend themselves, but I'm a Unitarian minister, and I make no apology for our interference throughout the ages in the political life of this island. We interfered in support of Catholic emancipation. We interfered against slavery. And we interfered on the rights of Jewish people when they were excluded from boat clubs, golf clubs, and from certain professions. And today, we are one of the few voices on this island calling for gay marriage, long before secular Ireland supported gay marriage. Thank you.
Well, that was a very stirring speech by Reverend Hudson, and I'd like to say that I happily agree with him. Nobody is here to say that religion is a force only for evil within the world. Nobody's here to say that politics is poisoned only by religion. What I would say, however, is that religion to this day does have an overall negative effect on politics. And to that end, I've based my talk more around the sort of effects we see in the modern day that religion has had on our politics, our politicians, and our government. In a recent poll by the Northern Ireland Life and Times, it suggested that of the Catholics in Northern Ireland, only 5% would vote for a unionist party, that being the Alliance Party, and of the Protestants in Northern Ireland, only 7% would vote for a nationalist party. What that suggests to me is that people are still divided along lines of religion. In our everyday politics, people don't vote based upon the policies, they don't vote based upon the politicians, they vote based upon old and biased lines. Catholics vote for the Catholic Party, Protestants vote for the Protestant Party, and frankly, it's the very definition of poison within a political system. People ignoring the issues in favour of voting only upon the basis of religion. Even within in our politicians already in government, you can see the streak of religious poison within the establishment. In recent times, we've had quotes from senior politicians, such as this one from Ian Paisley Jr. in 2007. I'm pretty repulsed by gay and lesbianism. I think it is wrong. I think that those people harm themselves and, without caring about it, harm society. Of course, it would be too much to ask of our current political parties to do anything to counteract or distance themselves from quotes such as these. Religiously driven quotes, and ones that the politicians themselves agree are backed up by the Bible and are henceforth, for some reason, supported by the parties, purely on the basis of them being biblically based. Probably the most famous one, however, is Iris Robinson's "There can be no viler act apart from homosexuality and sodomy than sexually abusing innocent children." It's a real shame for all of us that she paid more attention to that particular quote and less to Exodus 20, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Then again, it's maybe a good thing it finally took that for us to get her out of power. Still, I think there's something to be said about the very fact that she was able to get away with things like that. I mean, look at it from this point of view. If you'd seen someone like, say, Samantha Cameron in England come out with a quote like that, you would have seen a much greater backlash against from all widths and breadths of the political system. If you'd seen Michelle Obama come out with a statement saying that she hated gays, you would have expected a pretty big backlash from that. Over here, Iris Robinson didn't even get a reprimand from her own party. She was still held to be a perfectly functioning member of the party and someone who was perfectly capable of holding office and representing us as, I suppose you would say, the First Lady of our island. And frankly, I don't think that's acceptable in a modern or an enlightened society. I'd say that it's inarguable that things that in states like this, religion has had a negative effect. Then again, I'm not going to say that, as I said, I can't argue that it's had only negative effects. But when you do see things like this pop up within the newspaper, not be shouted down, able to be fully supported by the parties of this day and age, by the DUP, by Sinn Féin, by the largest political parties on our island, there's very little you can say to sort of back that sort of thing up. The only logic they can use to justify these sort of stances are those of religiously backed logic, i.e. that it's in the Bible and hence is acceptable for society. To move on to another point I'd like to make just in closing is, even in society today, there's a lot of segregation. I think that's probably the root and where the poison religion, and I suppose you would say the poisonous effect religion has had on our politics sort of seeps in, namely education. To this day and age, 51% of people are educated in schools run by the sorry, let me just check the name. Council for Catholic Managed Schools, my apologies. 51% are, this is a quote from, the Department of Education, educated in Catholic run schools. And I'd say that just in this day and age, for that to be acceptable, for segregation in schooling and for apartheid essentially to be acceptable, it's something that could only be justified on a religious-based argument. Thank you.
Invite Paul Shannon to the podium.
Good evening, everyone. It is a privilege to be asked to speak on this particular subject. And I'm someone who, I must admit, has very little knowledge of religion, has very little knowledge of arguments on the atheist side either. I am someone, indeed, who has absolutely no predilection for any of this. I come, as a sense, with clean hands. However, there is a feeling I have about this motion, about the arguments which have been given by the proposition side, and that is one of scapegoating. I must say, it is something that I have to say seems to me to be, quite frankly, a weakly based argument that religion is the fundamental driver of all the evils, or not all the evils, but of many of the evils which persist in politics in Ireland, both north and south. Fundamentally, it's an easy answer to the question. Politics in Northern Ireland, politics in the Republic of Ireland is, how can we put it, banjaxed at the moment. The economic situation, the situation of the Good Friday Agreement, the situation of the troubles which came before, are all things which most of us find abhorrent. Most of us find these things, find that our politicians are not doing enough about, that our politicians should be doing more about. And an easy answer, in terms of Northern Ireland especially, and in terms of more social issues in the Republic, is to blame religion, or to blame the influence which religion has had upon the political system. However, I would suggest that it comes down to a much more fundamental issue than one, particularly in Northern Ireland, of a few theological arguments which have been fought out for the past 500 years. I would come from it from the position that the main root of all evil, what is poisoning politics in Ireland, north and south, is politics, which is what poisons politics everywhere. Because politics is in itself something which is, although it is not evil, it is something which needs to feed on segregation, something which needs to feed on opposing ideas, and something which can only thrive, or political parties in a sense, can only thrive upon being able to differentiate the people, the citizenry of the nation they represent. And so we come to things like the Orange Order, who are obviously both a political and a religious organisation. But they are an organisation who, despite the influence they exert, are not possibly basically based on religious issues. They are an organisation which fundamentally, when it comes down to it, are based on issues of economics, of nationality, and of ethnic identity. If we really want to get to the nub of what is wrong in Ireland, what is wrong with politics on this island, we need to look at that. We need to look at what is wrong with segregation. Now, I'm not saying segregation in the terms that have been talked about before, but segregation is something which happens everywhere. People vote based on the people that they think are going to represent them. Therefore, working class people vote for the party which they think are going to best represent the working class. Middle class people and upper class people vote the people who they think are going to best represent middle class and upper class people. In exactly the same way, Sinn Féin and the DUP are supported by people who they think are going to work best for them. And that is not an issue of religion, that is an issue of community identity. And community identity is not necessarily based on religion. More importantly, especially in Northern Ireland, and especially historically in Ireland, this is a matter of economics. And this is a matter of economics. This has been a matter of economics from the 16th century, and of course, most importantly, we can say in the late 19th century, when the battle cry of Ulster Unionism was "Home rule is Rome rule." That is not necessarily real danger that was expected about religious persecution. More importantly, it's an economic fight. And on those points, I'll leave you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to thank all 6 speakers. We have plenty of opportunity now for questions, for comments. Please, no mini speeches from the floor. If you have any particular comments to make, perhaps direct them to a member of the audience. After we've had a discussion, I'll ask each of our speakers to sum up for 2 minutes, and then we can take, as usual, a vote on the motion. So, questions, comments?
Just the second last speaker, just pick up on your point about 51% of schools being of a religious bias, or Catholic, as you said in your case. So 2 parts of the question. One is that not born out of the fact that when schools were created, if it wasn't for a religious structure of some sort, there wouldn't have been schools at all? And 2, what role does religion play in schools anymore anyway? I mean, they might be a Catholic school, but they're not necessarily Catholic teachings or Protestant teachings within those schools. The only difference I could see is a child growing up as a sport played in them is the difference.
Well, I'd say that might have well have been the case, that that's why they are the way they are. But I'd say that sort of in this day and age, when we've shown that integrated schooling can be successful with schools such as, say, Elmwood Academy or Belfast Royal Academy that have done a great job with integrated schooling, that it's detrimental to society to still divide teaching upon religious lines. It keeps different groups separate in society, and it just furthers the segregation.
I don't know that any schooling is allowed to segregate still, that Catholic schools have to, within a catchment area, let Protestant children in and vice versa. So although they're based on a religious order from their inception, I don't think that's still, not to dismiss your fact completely, carry the same weight that it did 30, 40 years ago.
Well, I'd still say that in general terms, you'll still see a school and you'll think that's a very Protestant school or that's a Catholic school. You know, it's the majority thing where it's a Catholic school, people are surrounded by Catholic people, or the people who are, it's a Protestant school, people are surrounded by Protestant people all day, and it just sort of it creates a sort of cross and divide. Even if there are some, like a minority of people in that school, it still does create a cross and divide.
The Catholic Church is quite determined to have a separate system because it defends what it calls a Catholic ethos. I mean, are we going to suddenly pretend that this division in education isn't there and isn't being perpetuated by the churches? Of course it is. That's what the churches want.
And certainly in the Republic of Ireland, in legislation, Catholic schools and religious schools are allowed to discriminate on religious grounds in admittance. I mean, there's explicit exemptions in equality laws that allow religious schools and religious teacher training colleges and the medical training colleges to discriminate. The Catholic schools that they use what they call the integrated curriculum at primary level, where they control over 90% of the primary schools, which means that the Catholic ethos is permeated through the entire curriculum. So you can't even vindicate your constitutional right to remove your child from the religious instruction.
Just to say, the only interest I have in education is to say that Lagan College was founded by Unitarians, where everybody goes to school together.
Brian Clinton of the Humanist Association of Northern Ireland. I want to address a question to Chris. I agree with you, Chris. I don't think all religion is bad. I think it's the type of religion and the type of politics that have poisoned Irish society. It's the fusion of reactionary Christianity and sort of closed ethnic nationalism that you find in the Middle East, you find former Yugoslavia and so on. That fusion, that cocktail of those two things is a poisonous influence. You mentioned Francis Hutchinson, you mentioned the Quakers. I taught in a Quaker school for 36 years. I learned a lot from them about tolerance and a lot of things, and you're absolutely right. My question to you is, you're obviously a liberal Christian. Where the hell are these liberal Christians in Northern Ireland? Because all we hear are the ones like the Paisleys and the Robinsons and so on, who do poison this society, and the same applies on the Catholic Church side as well. You have since the 19th century a dominantly evangelical Protestantism, which crushed the liberal variety, the Montgomerys and people like that, the Cooks, the Hammers, the Paisleys and so on, crushed the liberals. And the same as we heard, when the Catholic Church became more ultramontane from the middle of the 19th century onwards, more papal. And the liberals were all pushed to the side, and that's still the case with the DUP. Where are these? It was time these liberal Christians, if they exist, came out of the closet in Northern Ireland and tried to change the dominant kind of Christianity that we are faced with.
Thank you very much for saying you agree with most of what I said, and I hope I see that in your vote at the end of the evening. But then again, if you're a humanist, you might have your own prejudice and only vote for the proposal because it's supported by people who are humanists or atheists. Can I say to you that as far as liberal Christians are concerned, I am regularly on radio and television up here spouting on about the religious Christian point of view. I was the first clergyman to walk on Pride wearing my collar, and since then I've been joined by many other clergymen. And also, and you can correct me on this, but I have it from good evidence from a noted journalist in Northern Ireland, while the humanists were still having a debate as to whether they would march on Pride, and were split on the idea of whether humanists should march on Pride. So the other point as well is that the people, the churches that made the most noise in the United Kingdom, and we are here part of the United Kingdom, on the issue of gay marriage, to which David Cameron changed the law only last week, were Unitarians, Quakers and liberal Jews and some Anglican churches, which will now allow marriage to take place in a church. So liberal voices have been heard, and liberal voices have been to the fore since Francis Hutchinson, and still are, in fighting for justice and equal rights. Not only in Ireland, I know we're specifically talking about Ireland, but globally as well.
Can I just correct you one thing, Chris? We had votes regularly in Human Association of Northern Ireland on participation in gay pride, and every year there's an overwhelming majority in favour of it. I agree with you, there's a small number of humanists who haven't shaken off that religious baggage.
No, you can't do that. That's a cheat. That's a cheat. So it's the religion that's keeping humanists back. They're pretty useless humanists.
Anyone else on the panel like to comment on this issue?
I think, I made the qualification at the start, which describes an amendment, that not all religion has been bad or painful in Northern Ireland. My own experience within a religious culture, actually in the past 30 years, 20 years, I've been working in the religious affairs department of the BBC. So I've probably been around more clergy in that time and more congregations than maybe anyone else here today, and had fascinating conversations with some of them. I have found that some of the most determinedly hardline evangelical bigots can be very engaging and pleasant people when you meet them in their own living rooms. I mean, I remember sitting with Ian Paisley once, and he was trying to convert me, and while we were sitting talking, he had this kind of life-size ceramic cheetah sitting beside his chair, and he would stroke its head. And he's just a lovely house, and makes people feel very warm. But there is a very strong liberal strain within the Presbyterian Church in Ireland. I'm thinking of figures like John Dunlop and Leslie Carroll, John Barclay, who described himself as a Presbyterian in the tradition of the United Irishmen. And within the Catholic Church, there's almost a hierarchical division between liberals and idiots, in that priests who actually have to deal with ordinary people tend to be a lot more liberal and accommodating than the people who rise through the ranks by asserting their bigoted positions. I noticed that Matt Baggett, for instance, was talking to the Conference of Bishops last week in Dundalk and came away without managing to make a single arrest, which was a great misfortune. But no, I accept that there are many liberal and decent people in the churches today.
I think there is a difficulty about people sticking their heads above the parapet for a whole variety of reasons, whether it's for political reasons, whether it's to protect, if they're members of a religious community organisation, whether it's to protect their own position within that organisation. And some people just feel, unfortunately, that it is better to keep their heads down. I mean, I'm thinking, I'm a member of a very small religious group here, and there are many small religious groups, and you would rarely see them sticking their heads above the parapet in order to make statements to challenge the status quo. And I'm not saying that I agree with that, but I think that is a fact. So, for example, where are the Baha'is, for example? And you don't see many of these people having that conviction. I think that they prefer to operate in other kinds of ways. So, for example, Northern Ireland Interfaith Forum, Council for Christians and Jews. And the problem there is they don't have the same kind of influence, they don't have the same kind of clout as do some of the things that Chris was talking about. So I think there is a problem, because I think that we all have been influenced by this atmosphere here where people are afraid to stick their heads above the parapet.
Michael?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of sticking your heads above the parapet, when Ireland was partitioned, you essentially got a sectarian Protestant state in Northern Ireland and a sectarian Catholic state in the Republic of Ireland. And whereas in Northern Ireland the Catholic minority was large enough to be able to more or less hold its own and politically, stay fighting against the discrimination that occurred, the Protestant minority in the Republic of Ireland was not sufficiently large, and essentially had to either emigrate or keep their heads down. My wife was a Protestant in Limerick growing up, when she was going to the local Catholic school as a child. She and her fellow pupils were spat on by the local Catholic children on their way to the Protestant school. And that's a minority that's very much forgotten about in the whole debate, is the Protestant minority in the Republic of Ireland. So I think gradually, people as secular democracy generally takes hold in the Western world, people are more likely to be more comfortable in speaking out on liberal issues than they were in the past. I mean, look at the no ground issue, which I mentioned earlier on. He had to resign as a government minister because he tried to introduce a social welfare scheme that the Catholic Church opposed on the basis that there was a mother and child element of it that would have involved, as the Catholic Church said, the state involving itself in issues, moral issues so delicate as gynecology. And he had to resign, and the Taoiseach specifically wrote to him and said to him, you know, by continuing to promote this scheme, you're creating the impression of defying the hierarchy. You know, so I mean, it's you know, it's correct. I think it's moving in the right direction, and people like Chris, you know, it's good to have, obviously. But you know, we still got a fair way to go.
We have a few comments to make here about tonight. I think historians and scientists generally tend to make a distinction sometimes between distal and proximate causes. I mean, I think it's impossible to understand what happened in this country without the influence of religion. But at the same time, I think that there were proximate causes that they would need to take into account, like local political grievances. I mean, philosophers like to talk about necessary and sufficient causes. I think religion was necessary for the kind of conflict we had, but I don't think it was sufficient. I mean, I think a counterexample of a purely religious conflict on one side would be sort of the Muslim-Arab war against the Israeli state. I think that is primarily driven by Islamic ideas of conquest and its history.
Nothing to do with territory then?
It is about territory, it's about Islamic territory. It's about what the Prophet said, don't let two religions in Arabia. I mean, this is what they will say to you when you ask them the question. But I'm so glad that Michael Nugent has been here tonight, because I think we might get sort of bogged down in history, but we should remember that it's also about the future. It's about creating a political future in both of these countries based on freedom and justice and well-being. And we have to ask ourselves the question whether or not religion, Catholicism, Protestantism, is likely to make a positive contribution. And I think there are reasons to doubt this. And one of the speakers brought up a number of statistics. Well, last week it was reported in The Guardian, there was a study done on the Orangemen. Something like 60% of Orangemen think that Catholics are IRA sympathisers. Something like 6% of these people would be happy for their sons or daughters to marry someone of a religion. Now, I have to have a close friend who's in the Orange Order, a smart fellow, nice guy, a bit dogmatic at times. Well, he's trying to be a teacher, and he was offered a position in a Catholic school. Now, rather than saying, well, I have no problems teaching there, he had to ring his Grand Master of the Orange Order to see if he could work there, whether or not that was acceptable. A couple of weeks ago, we had a report that a politician, a police officer who was killed by the IRA, well, he got into Trump. I mean, this speaker here mentioned Irish Robinson. I mean, this is a concern. Concern about children, concern about women, concern about minorities. In this country and in Ireland, women still do not have the right to have an abortion. Why? Well, the UN came down and said it was because of the profound moral views of the Irish people. What that means is the Catholic power and also the Protestants, this is the one issue that they can all agree on. No, women are not allowed to have an abortion. So, I mean...
Is that wrapping up there, man?
Yeah. I mean, when you're voting tonight, just don't think about the past, but think about the future and who is more likely to contribute to a better future. Is it some of the people in this room, the liberals, the humanists, or is it going to be the sort of dogmatic Catholics and Protestants? So I'll just leave that with you.
Thank you. Paul or John?
I'd agree with sort of the first thing that you said. It sort of struck out to me really about the necessary and causes, essentially, what you were saying. I'd say that regardless of religion in Northern Ireland, you would have had conflict, but I think for the sheer sort of bloodthirsty hatred...
Where did those distinctions arise from? They arose from essentially religious distinctions. We are the same race, we speak the same language, we enjoy many of the same things. I mean, there's differences in the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. There are differences in culture, language, history. We don't really have that.
Oh, come on, you never hear about the Reformation. Most don't know anything about this.
Hold on, sorry.
That's why
Let the panel
bring it across.
Yeah, I just want to balance with your story about your orange friend, which was very good. You know, good point to make, good anecdotal story. But let me just balance it with this. I don't know if many of you people here have heard of Kevin Cardiff. Up hands those who've heard of Kevin Cardiff. Michael, you should have heard.
No.
The Secretary General of the Department of Finance, Kevin Cardiff, the Secretary General of the Department of Finance in the Republic of Ireland, who not so long ago mistraced 3.5 billion. Although he's Secretary General of the Department of Finance, numbers were not his thing. Okay? Now, Nessa Childers, who is a member of the Labour Party and I believe a secularist, in her wisdom decided to vote against him being one of the I think it's I forget the auditors, yeah, an auditor in Europe, because the man has serious difficulty with adding up. And she was phoned by, and I know him personally, a great guy, her atheist secular friend, Prunchis de Rossa, a fellow MEP, that told her, if you don't vote for this idiot, you'll be kicked out of the Labour Party. So it would appear that secular politics are every bit as good as the Orange Order.
Yeah, I would like to develop the idea about reactionary politics and ethnic chauvinism feeding off each other. Religion in Ireland generally, but more acutely in Northern Ireland, defines people's ethnic identity. And one of the things that we have is that if you change your religion or if you disaffiliate from your faith, you're seen as betraying your ethnic community. And so with integrated schools, which you mentioned, we have an interesting thing because these schools are specifically Christian. The child must be declared a specific Christian identity, Catholic or Protestant, and must be indoctrinated. Atheist kids aren't allowed. Jewish, Muslim, whatever kids not allowed. That then leads me to the basic question, which is this: should faith schools be abolished? If not, why not?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that I don't think they should be state faith schools.
Yeah.
Should be abolished. I mean, people should be entitled to fund their own religious schools if they want to. But there needs to be a foundation of secular state education, and that's something that's not just a personal opinion. That's something that's enshrined in human rights conventions that both Ireland and the United Kingdom have subscribed to. That parents have a right to have their children educated in a way that's consistent with their either religious or philosophical beliefs. And that means that as a baseline they should not be indoctrinated with religious beliefs that are different to those of their parents. Now in the Republic of Ireland, over 90% of the primary schools are run by the Catholic Church, and over 97% of the primary schools are religiously run, so you can't vindicate that right in practice. It's a really critical thing, and it's because primary education is the mechanism, or one of the key mechanisms through which religious influence in society perpetuates itself. Because if children are being taught these religious beliefs by the same person who's teaching them objective facts, it's quite difficult at that age to distinguish between one and the other.
I think that I think there is a difficult question here because I think there are several issues which would seem to me to presage a serious conflict between secular culture and religious culture at some time, whether it be the demand of religious people for separate education, or whether it be something like female circumcision, or any circumcision, if you like, in a culture where I mean, we had an instance in the Irish Republic of a boy dying on a kitchen table because father had a religious obligation to cut a part of him off. Or something that we haven't even foreseen yet, you know, because we're a religious culture that isn't predominant among us, but which may be. And within our own culture, the thing that bases this question most strongly, I think, is the one of education. I mean, Michael, you know, paints a picture which is quite pleasant of an idea that religion is a private thing, but does religion have the private right to indoctrinate children, or to scar children, or to or to marry children to adults, as happens in many cultures? You know, I think we have to at some stage say no, it doesn't have those rights. And yet, how could you possibly have a secular culture that would stand firmly against those things? You couldn't do it. It's inconceivable because of the stresses that would arise from it. But I would certainly a government in a secular country which promotes the idea of faith schools, encourages religious groups to have faith schools, I think is betraying the secular legacy that was so hard won, and really is something to be discouraged. I certainly would not like to see the expansion of faith schools and religious education, having come through it, you know, because for one thing, the primary thing that we said against it was a bad education. Education is what secular culture believes in, and secular culture knows what education is. Religious culture doesn't.
I have a big worry about what's happening in Northern Ireland and what our politicians are proposing for the future. I was a great believer in a program called Shared Future, which I thought would yield better things for this place. That was shelved. We now have what the government's calling the Program for Cohesion, Sharing and Integration, and I find that worrying as well. They've had a consultation that's going to come back in the public domain shortly, but Peter Robinson at the recent DUP conference used this phrase shared education rather than integrated education. And he doesn't mean integrated education by shared education, he means some kind of fudge whereby facilities might be shared, this kind of thing. And so we are not at the stage yet where we're prepared to address this very central issue of what the secular state is prepared to provide in the way of an education that doesn't have a religious foundation, and it really worries me.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed on this regarding education, and I'm surprised when you say that, I don't know if you're talking specifically about Lagan College, that Lagan College would reject somebody because their parents were not belong to any particular faith. I'm not sure that's correct. I bow to your wisdom, but I'm not sure it's correct, because I was talking today to a lady who, her children go to Belfast Royal Academy, and she's a Baha'i, and I know in Belfast Royal Academy they've no difficulty accepting people of all faiths and no faith.
Can I come back on that? A lot of people will send their kids to BRA specifically because they would rather not send them to a school where they have to declare them as Catholic or Protestant. So you get a lot of people sending kids of various faiths and none, sending their kids to BRA because they don't have to declare affiliation.
Yeah, but I would have thought that was the same for Lagan College as well.
That's the legislation.
But one of the things that, coming from the south originally, and I'm living up here now, I know Michael will agree with me on this, one of the biggest difficulties in the south is because of the absolute, nearly absolute control that the Catholic Church has over primary education. That I've known a number of people who actually would normally profess no religion, would have had their children baptised Catholic, so to get them a place in the school. And that's outrageous. That is a completely unfair interference. But hopefully the Minister for Education now, Rory Quinn, intends to address that issue. I think even Dermot Martin, the Catholic Bishop of Dublin, said it is wrong that the Catholic Church, which there's about, I think 80% of the people in Dublin City nominally declare themselves Catholic at this stage, but 95%, I think, I might be wrong on that, Michael, but 95% of primary schools are controlled by the Catholic Church. And there has been problems where serious problems where children have been excluded from education because they don't subscribe to the major church in the south. But having said that, I noticed that a number of schools up here have actually over the years changed. And whilst initially they may have had a Protestant ethos, have become more multi-faith and non-faith. The one thing I do, and I think we probably would all agree on this, I'm very much a person that believes one law for all, and I'm nervous of what's called multiculturalism and introducing. I'm afraid I'm an old-fashioned child of the Enlightenment. I still want one law for all, and I don't want a multicultural society where there's Sharia laws for Muslims, Catholic law for Catholics, and I would concur with Michael and Malachi on that how we arrive at that law might be different, but I believe in one law for all.
Paul, comment on that? Yeah, I was going to say in that, just that I don't think it's particularly related to motion that we're talking about this evening. I mean, it's about whether religion has actually poisoned politics on the island. And groups, every group, all groups with an interest are always going to try and put their case forward to government. And I think the idea of trying to stop religious groups doing that at all is fundamentally misconceived.
I was going to say that for religious groups to claim that the state was the political entity must give them power over children is a political demand.
Well, I think that whether they're demanding it or not, it seems in Northern Ireland at the moment that it is something which a substantial part of the populace wish to see retained. Whether that means that it shouldn't go in the future is something completely different.
Well, I think part of the problem is that you have a self-reinforcing system. People want to retain it because they were indoctrinated by it. It's breaking the cycle of indoctrination is what I'm concerned about.
Okay, thanks. So let me move on. We're quite queuing up. Top back, Graham and lads.
Hi, my question is to all the religious perhaps members of the panel, particularly the utilitarian minister, the Unitarian minister.
Surely are oh, wait, the Unitarians are controlling the world.
My question is about the origin of the troubles. It seems to be, the main plague of politics in this country. And my question is about origins. Is about you said a lot about how religious organizations they do a lot of good in this country, and they help to bridge, perhaps the divide in this country. My question is, where did the divide come from? What prompted the 1641 uprising, where Catholics burned Protestants in churches? What prompted the penal laws? What prompted the invasion of Ireland by Oliver Cromwell? And it was religion. So to say that religion has helped build bridges over the religious divide is just it's moot. Because quite simply, the religious divide is the product of religion.
Thank you, Mr. Tickle.
Well, I'm not going to apologise for, or not going to make an excuse for any of the things you pointed out. I was only born, well, I'm not going to tell you many years ago, so I wasn't part of any of what you described, and absolutely right, yes. Religion, of course, played a major role in all the historical points that you've made. I'm saying this as a double man, I wouldn't be terribly in order of Oliver Cromwell, because he to some extent made Parliament supreme, and he also did away with the power of an absolute church in England and allowed the Levellers, Unitarians, Quakers, and all of us such disgruntled bunches who eventually went on to create the Labour movement in Britain, and probably the Liberal...
And Jews.
Yeah, and Jews, that's right. Yeah, he was the first to allow Jews into the army, into the Model Army, which was the first People's Army. So poor old Ollie gets a lot of bad press in Ireland, but there were certain aspects of what he did in Britain that I would actued praise. And
it pales into insignificance.
It does actually, yeah, and it does to some extent, Malachi. But the point that I was making was is it Paul?
Yes.
Paul quite rightly pointed or drew us back to what the proposal is tonight, because we were going off on different tangents in our discussion. And the proposal is very clear that religion has poisoned politics. I was making the case that that's not an absolute. There are various religious organisations in this island, and churches like mine, who have actually contributed very positively to politics, more so than some politicians in the campaigning we did over the years. Whether it was against slavery, as I pointed out, against discriminating against Catholics, discriminating against Jews, and today to the fore in pushing for gay marriage. So that's the point I'm making. See, if you want to vote for this, you have to vote for it from an absolute point of view.
Why?
Because that's what it is. It's an absolute proposal.
So let's say something about Cromwell and Drubb. This is one of my favourite headlines from local papers. It's just the parochialism of local papers. There was an academic who was born in Drubb that did a study some years back, outlined some of the things Chris was saying, and it was covered in the local Drogheda papers under the headline, "Cromwell not so bad after all." Says an old man.
And he's still there.
But the issue, by the way, I mean, Chris is right to a certain extent. It's not religion per se that causes the problems. The problems are caused by faith and by dogma. And by faith in this context, I mean believing things on disproportionately to the available evidence. And dogma is just, just not quite being told not to question things. And it is true that religion, that politics has also been poisoned by secular faith and secular dogma, in terms of faith in the markets, regulated markets, and in other countries in terms of the faith and dogma of totalitarianism or communism or fascism. But the distinction between those other dogmas and faiths and religious dogma and faith is that when those other dogmas come up against the evidence of reality, reality wins out, and people notice that what they're saying isn't consistent with what's actually happening. But what religious faith and dogma does is it places its supposed benefits and punishments in an untestable afterlife, and it means that it escapes the reality that other dogmas have to face up to, and also it's because the rewards are in eternity. They're far more attractive. They're more resistant to evidence once they're formed. So it is more important to challenge religious faiths and dogmas because they have managed to evade the normal checks and balances that reality imposes on other faiths and dogmas.
Mark, do you want to go on this?
No, I'm fine. Carry on.
I'd simply like to make the point that during the 16th, 17th century, you have religious war all over Europe, and we do not stop getting war, we do not stop getting rebellion and uprising in different countries where there is a dispute over territory, over power, over control by different groups, simply because there is no religious difference between them. For example, in the past 30, 40 years, we've seen what terror a group like ETA in Spain can bring. And that's not based on any religious difference, but it is based on some of the things that are shared with the Irish situation. And so, in that sense, although I agree that historically religion has been one of the reasons why these wars have been fought, these troubles have happened, there are much broader foundations for that. Much broader foundations about the human nature, about the human condition, about survival, about power, and about territorial claims by different groups. And that's all I'd like to say. Is that I don't think it's religion that has been poisoned. I think it's that religion has basically been used as a veil for trying to get power.
I think perhaps what we do forget is that religion and politics were the same thing for a very long time. I mean, Hugh O'Neill and the others defined Ireland as Catholic for the sake of getting Spanish support against Elizabeth and the English. And I mean, the creation of the sense of nationhood in Ireland was woven at the roots with Catholicism and inseparable from it, as was the sense of Englishness with Protestantism at that time. Now we have retained that legacy far longer than certainly than England has, and we've retained that longer than other European countries have. That legacy is the backdrop to all of our problems about pernicious religious influences in political life in the north and south of Ireland, and that's the legacy that we have to acknowledge, accept, and move on from. And I mean, both nationalism and unionism were theologically informed until very, very recent times. I mean, okay, I would say the last hurrah of Catholicism inside Irish republicanism was probably 1981 and the hunger strikers, when they could still, without inviting a hollow laugh all round, depict an IRA man smeared with shite saying the rosary with the Virgin Mary behind him in his cell on a wall mural. You know, that is something that, you know, they would never even try that now. That was the end, if you like, the final expiry of the infusion of Catholic theology inside republicanism. The end of Protestant theology inside unionism, I would say, was really was ended with Ian Paisley, and when Ian Paisley stood down as First Minister in Northern Ireland. It's beyond anyone's conception now that a senior DUP member would step forward in the executive or the assembly and say the kind of things that were routine to Ian Paisley. You know, that nationalism had to be opposed because it was part of a project to oppose the Pope of Rome, the Scarlet Whore of Babylon. You know, that's over. And thank God it's over. Thank somebody it's over. But it ended about 2 years ago, you know, and in republicanism it ended about 30 years ago, you know, and these are very, very recent in the legacy. Shimmers still, but we're moving on.
John, last comment. Well, the point I just wanted to make quickly was with regards to sort of the troubles or problem you brought up, that often they aren't caused entirely by religion. There are backline problems to it, but I think it really does take religion to sort of turn it into really sort of vehement and really bitter hatred. I think that's the effect that religion has upon events that you described, like Cromwell or the Troubles themselves, I think. I think on that line. Okay.
I just want to go back to some of the opposition have tried to make out that talking about education is moving away from the motion. I would just like to say that it isn't, and I would go back to 1923 when the government of Northern Ireland tried to set up a fully integrated system throughout Northern Ireland. Now, they ran into opposition straight away. The opposition came from the churches, Protestant and Catholic. They didn't want to have an integrated system, but the government held the purse strings, so the government was putting pressure on them, and it was trying to force them to agree a system that would bring all the children together. Now they fought this out over many months, and they were arguing all the time about how could this be done, how could you possibly have Protestants and Catholics in the same classroom. And the Protestant side then, they latched onto the idea they would push for the Bible, because the Bible is sort of neutral territory. They would push for the Bible, and the Bible would have to be the only thing that would be used in the classroom, and that would be neutral. The Catholic side wouldn't take that. They wouldn't have it. And so what you ended up with was the Protestants struck a deal with the government. The Protestant churches handed over their schools to the government. They became state schools. The Catholics stayed outside, and they had no state support at all. And so the Catholic side got a third-rate education for about 30 years until the government weakened and started to give them money, because they just regarded them as a private system. Then they started to weaken and started to give them money, and over time, by the time you get to the 1990s, the Catholics were fully funded, as much as what had been the Protestant side, but they were still essentially their own show. They were running their own show, now fully funded by the state, whereas the Protestants, they were quite green with envy. They'd given away their schools. They only had minority representation in the boards of governors, and basically they had lost out badly. But now they had lost out badly, but the people who really lost out were the children in the 30s and 40s who grew up in third-rate schools because there was no funding. And that was the church deciding, you know, and it's decided by the hierarchy. There's been a lot of talk about religion here, as if religion is just ideas, as if it's it's just, I think about God and all that. No, we're talking about institutions. We're talking about social power. And this decision is taken, it's like a consultation with the ordinary parishioners. That's how it's going to be. And that is the church working in politics. And I think you see it every time the church gets power in society. It's an institution, it's a big institution. You see it in Israel, where it's a sectarian state. You see it in Islamic countries. As soon as they get into power, it's an oppressive regime. The same with the Catholic Church in the south. And unfortunately, Northern Ireland has had a similar outcome here too. If you get the church too close to politics, it's bad news for everybody. So I'm all in favour of a secular state, and the more secularism, the better.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's clear from an atheist perspective. We don't want an atheist state. An atheist state would be as bad as a religious state. What we want is a secular state, which is a state that just deals with this world, which there's enough problems in to be dealing with, and leaves ideas about the supernatural to individual people, families, churches, religions, organisations to deal with themselves. It's not purely private. I mean, it can be it's in the public sphere in the same way as many organisations are, but it's not in the sphere of influencing the operation of the state, which should stay strictly neutral. And there's one very important point that I think has been missed out, and so Chris kind of half touched on it, is the danger of Islamic influence on the state in terms of Sharia law on affecting mainly female Muslims who are oppressed within their own religion by Sharia law. It's kind of creeping in the United Kingdom, and there's a danger in the public as well. But when the Irish government passed a blasphemy law a couple of years ago, a law against blasphemy, because it was in the 1937 Constitution, again, everything kind of tied together. It was used in the United Nations by the Islamic states in their arguments for the imposition of blasphemy laws throughout the world, as an example of a modern Western state passing blasphemy laws in the 21st century. So, this is not a particularly religious thing. They're saying it's something that states do, even in Western democracies. And the only organisations in the Republic of Ireland that supported that blasphemy law openly were some Muslim representatives. So that's a really, really big danger. I mean, generally, I think we're moving forward. I think that in the Republic of Ireland, certainly, the type of secular campaigns that we're campaigning for now, that would maybe 20, 30 years ago have been about trying to change public opinion. I think they're now more about trying to change the government's opinion and get the government to realise that public opinion has changed and that the laws have to be changed to reflect that. But that Islamic danger is a very real one.
Well, the danger there is that the police and the state will have to move against ethnic minority religious groups on issues like the protection of women and the protection of children. I mean, figures were published just yesterday, I believe, in the papers, of over the Scottish and English police, or the English and Welsh police have reported statistics of over 2,000 honour attacks against women in Britain in the past year. Now that's attacks ranging from throwing acid in the face to murder against women who have violated the religious injunction to be sexually available to whoever your father wants to bind you to. And it's those issues are going to bring conflict between the secular world and the religious world. It would be nice to imagine that you could just determine that we would have a secular society and that's it, and it's one law for all, as Chris says, and I agree with that. But that will bring us into conflict with religious cultures who do things differently, who have assumptions about the position of women and children, which we cannot accept. And in the past, the tradition has been that you let them get on with it. You separate it from it, and you say, well, the law is for secular people, and if people want to cut things off their children's penises or whatever, then that's what they do. So let them do it. I see difficulty.
Chris, and then two last questions.
Just briefly on what Malachi and Michael have touched on. And again, it is the issue of the imposition of what I would see, particularly with Sharia law, or any attempt by any religious organisation to impose its will on the people. I mean, the beauty about America is it's a religiously pluralist society as opposed to one church dominating. But on a positive point, on Wednesday, I'm actually speaking in the Central Mosque in London, along with a Jewish rabbi and imams who favour what we're supporting, that they themselves, because the majority of Muslims in Britain do not support the imposition of Sharia law.
See if you can get someone to walk in gay pride with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it would be dangerous for them. But I agree with you. I agree with you, Malachi.
Last two questions. Sorry, there's people want to get in, but you've already had your go. There's two more. This gentleman here and this chap here, the last two. I'm sorry, there's other people want to get in.
Obviously a case of keeping the best wine to the last. Sorry about that. I think, having heard what has been said, that most people here would agree that churches like the Unitarians and probably the Quakers as well have done quite a lot of good in society, and they probably on balance have done more good than harm in politics. In fact, if those had been the two dominant churches in Ireland, North and South, I don't think the country would have got itself into the mess it's in, which I think probably carries the motion in itself. The trouble is that they are very much minority churches. The great majority of people in this island are members of other churches which have not been up to now nearly as liberal. And I think the case has been made that all the mainstream churches, both Catholic and Protestant, have in fact poisoned politics in the past, and that's basically what the motion is. Not what we're doing now, not what the nice liberals are talking about doing in the future and so on. It's what has happened in the past. And the speakers who are proposing the motion have given numerous examples where undoubtedly poison has been applied to the politics by the churches. And none of the opponents of the motion have denied that or been able to counter it. So I think it's not a case of...
We're home and back.
Sorry?
We're home and back.
Some churches have done some good, but an awful lot of churches have done an awful lot of harm. Has religion poisoned politics in this island? I think in the past it certainly has.
Okay. Last question and then...
Well, first of all, I want to deal with that because I'm actually, although I'm not a humanist, I think it's the other way around. That, as they say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That it's those people then that wish to find political power but then saw religion as a mechanism by obtaining political power. And it's the fact that because religion was their route towards power, it's actually politics is poisoning religion, not the other way around. What I want to ask, actually, the panel, is in a situation where we have declining resources, how do we moderate? Because it's inevitable that those people who have resources, so the Wahhabist tendency that we've been talking about, who have so much resources, how do we, and it was, of course, the fact that the church was able to, sort of gather, I'm talking about the Catholic Church, I guess, in the South now, where, because of the news today, where they're going to cut state budgets, you've all said, oh, we should have state education, we should have state access to all these things. And yet the political climate right now is that the state should withdraw from providing poor relief, from providing from providing education, and from providing also actually even access to healthcare. Now in the States, where I've worked for a year, actually, the church was very much involved with providing healthcare. But the problem, of course, with that situation is then how you moderate access. Because as we've heard, access is through having a particular religious faith. And I just wonder how you would deal with this situation that we're in at the moment, where those people who have money have power, and it's inevitable the influence of religion, in providing that, because you seem to ignore this current, economic climate. How do we deal with that situation where we moderate those religions who do have this desire for political power, or the politicians that are using religion as access to power? So anyway, I just wanted to answer.
That's a very quick comment I want to do and then allow you to sum up. So quick reactions to those.
Well, the obvious way would be to tax religions. in the same way that all other organisations that have a lot of money in society are taxed and stop giving them tax exemptions simply because they believe that the creator of the universe is having to do with what they're doing. There are also a lot of things, particularly in the Republic of Ireland, that could be done at no cost. Amend the Equality Acts to remove the exemptions that religions have to discriminate on religious grounds. Remove the requirement that the President and judges have to swear religious oaths, which prevents non-religious people from at least conscientious non-religious people from taking those offices. And a range of other things. I mean, I could go through a list, but you get the general point. There are things that could be done that don't cost money, and there are things that could be done like taxing that would actually raise money. And on the first point you made, I do agree with you, and in fact I said during my initial contribution that politics has also poisoned religion. But that doesn't mean that the other isn't also the case. They've both poisoned each other.
I think given that the Irish experience is that devolving welfare to the churches leads to orphanages being run as rape camps. And I think, I think a lot of people understand that very deeply in Ireland now. And those who are inclined to forget it will be reminded of it very strongly should there be any suggestion of further devolution of welfare powers to the churches. I can't imagine, I think, all right, there's an economic necessity, if you like, for the state to disengage as much as it possibly can, but certainly devolving it to the church would be, there would be a very, very strong counter-argument given the experience that there's been.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult issue. I think we are on a trajectory whereby religious institutions will take up more of the slack. I think that Malachi's point about rape camps is slightly sensationalist, although I accept what has gone on in the past. But I think that there are ways in which religious institutions do act responsibly to care for the poor and all this kind of thing. The point about taxing the churches is that religious institutions are charities, and that raises problems for other charities as well. I just see this as an inevitable trajectory, and I think that it may be that the best features of the institutions will emerge in the mix.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all our speakers and your comments. I'm going to give each person 2 minutes. I'm going to go in reverse order to sum up and then put the motion to the floor. So I'd like to invite Paul.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think any of us on the opposition are trying to deny that religion has influence in politics. This debate isn't about whether religion has influence or whether religion has ever had influence. It's about whether religion has poisoned politics. It's about whether religion has fundamentally made politics worse. Now that does not necessarily mean that simply because religions put forward in the same way that many other groups do, in the same way that other non-governmental organisations do, put forward their view to government, and we don't agree with that view, that does not simply mean that they have poisoned politics. For example, a lot of people brought up the idea that churches were illiberal, that churches were bringing forward illiberal ideas. But there are many people, in fact, who profess no religious faith, who would bring forward conservative, illiberal, as some may call them, views, and have them bear on government. And indeed, many of those people use religion as a shield, or as a veil. It is, as the gentleman pointed out, it is very often that not that religion drives politics, but that politics is what poisons religion. Politics is, as we said, I think all of us said, or many of us said at some point, that it is the power that corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Of course, what that means for us today is that we must say, we absolutely must decide that it is not religion which has poisoned politics in Ireland, and it is not that politics is necessarily poisonous in Ireland. It is simply that politics is politics, and politicians will always use whatever means they can to get forward their particular aims. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
to sum up.
I suppose in closing it just falls to say, again, that nobody is trying to say the religion has done no good in the world or the religion has done only evil. But yeah, I'd just like to address the point of politics being the thing poisoning religion. At the end of the day, politics is you can only argue that politics has poisoned religion on the basis of fact that political arguments are based off of religious ones. I'm sort of stumbling words here, but what I'm trying to get at essentially is you can only use religion in politics if the argument already exists and can be formulated out of religion. You can't say pass a blasphemy law without it already being supported by the Bible or religious institutions. You can't argue against gay marriage without it being using religion without it already being supported by religious institutions. The very fact that politicians can use religion to support their arguments is only apparent because religion is already making those arguments. At the end of the day, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. At the end of the day, the politicians can only make arguments based upon religion because the churches are already making those arguments. They can only make arguments about, say, as I said, blasphemy, because that's something that the church is already opposed to. And at the end of the day, religion, we've given multiple examples of the negative effect religion has had in the past and on current society. And while it has had some positive effects, at the same time I'd say that it's been an overwhelmingly negative. Right.
This Hudson to sum up.
I'm going to be very brief because I think we're so far ahead here. I really don't, because I have too much respect for Malachi and Michael and John. I don't want the vote to be embarrassing. So I'll be brief. Well, maybe a problem, but can I just say before I sum up, just very, very briefly, on a personal note, I just want to say, for me, it's a real thrill to be sharing this platform with my old comrade Michael Nugent tonight, because Michael and myself and Michael's late wife Anne go back a long time, and we've been on many a campaign and many trains together, and I've nothing but the highest regard for Michael. I hope he doesn't win this battle, but I have been with him in every other battle since, and he is a great person. Don't vote for him though. Just to sum up by saying a few things that I've already said, as we saw earlier on, there was even tentative agreement on it that humanists fall out as well, if even just on the gay issue. And ironically, I know it's not Ireland, but it is another island, Cuba. Only last year, Fidel Castro, well-known secularist, apologized to the gay people of Cuba because of the abysmal treatment of them by secular Cuba. And as I said earlier on, Malachi did add an amendment and really began to sway quite a bit. Then I think I support Malachi's amendment, but I don't think his amendment's going to be put to the floor, so I ask you to vote against. And also to point out, the debate is not about the existence of God, it's about whether religion per se has poisoned the political body of Ireland. Look, there are certain qualitative Christian values. Indeed, what Karen Armstrong calls, the great theologian, what Karen Armstrong calls the golden rule that's common to all great religions. Love thy neighbour as thyself. And in many, many ways, that has been to the fore of Christian values throughout time, including this island. And it has influenced many politicians who have crossed the divide to make peace with each other. To ask anyone to support this motion, I would have extreme difficulty. That's why I'm speaking against it tonight. Only last week I was with Capuchin monks in Dublin, who every week feed 500 homeless people. And I did a service with them in Dublin, providing a service that the state has failed to provide. Clonard Monastery, as we know the incredible work that the Redemptorist priests have done up there. And I'll finish up on that. But I just want to say one thing to Michael. Atheist Ireland. Does Atheist Ireland allow Christians to be members? Because my church allows atheists to be members.
Michael, someone. Okay. Yeah, that's return the compliment to Chris. I mean, Chris and I have worked together on many both liberal campaigns in the Republic of Ireland and anti-terrorist campaigns in Northern Ireland. And, we've seen eye to eye on most things until we found God. But I think the important thing, look, nobody's saying that all religion is bad. There's different degrees. As Sam Harris so eloquently put it, very few people stay awake at night worrying about what the Amish are going to do next. but the motion is not. The motion is not that all religion is bad. The motion is quite clear. It's that religion has poisoned politics on this island. And what's happening is that those of us who are atheists or secularists are looking at the motion and using our reason to see what is actually there on the page. And those arguing from the religious perspective are, in typical fashion, imagining things that aren't actually there. And they're imagining that the motion is either that all religion has poisoned politics or that religion is the only thing that has poisoned politics. That's not what the motion is. The motion is that religion has poisoned politics, and I think we've adequately argued that that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel a lot of anger, a lot of angst has come out in this debate. I'm not sure whether it's motivated by some people's individual experiences of churches or of prejudice or of fear of other kinds of things. But I do think that we've heard a range of views concerning what is the topic of the debate. Is it religion or is it the churches? And I think we've discovered that it's only a select number of churches and it's by no means all religion. So I think that the difficulties caused on our island have been restricted to a select group of churches and certainly are not characteristic of all religion on this island. And as we've heard from Chris, and as I could describe, there's a lot of good that has been done by religions who may not get the limelight or may not get the headlines, but there is a lot of work, a lot of good work that is going on. So let me try to lift the mood with a joke. David Cameron calls in the head of MI5 and he asks, how come the Jews know everything before we do? And so the MI5 chief says, well, it's simple. Jews have an expression in Yiddish. It's, nu was titzech. So what's happening? And they just ask each other and that's how they find out everything. So Cameron's very impressed and he says that he personally wants to go uncover and he wants to see how this system works. And so he disguises himself as an Orthodox Jew. He has a black hat on, a beard, long sideburns, and he's secretly driven in an unmarked car and he's dropped off in Golders Green, which is one of London's most Jewish neighbourhoods. And so as he stands on a busy street corner, a little old Jewish man comes shuffling along. Cameron comes up to him and whispers, Nu vus titzech? And the old guy whispers, did you hear that idiot Cameron is in Golders Green? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed myself tonight. I'm not going to make any stout defence of the motion because I think it's so obvious, and I would rather tell you that I've just enjoyed your company so much that I think I'll come back next year again. But I do think that one of the things that has come out of this debate is a suggestion that we are on the cusp of interesting times, and the old religious argument in Ireland comes out of the 17th century, comes out of the ghastly times in between and the wars and contentions in between and the partition of Ireland in 1921. I think those arguments are over, and I think one of the things that made the peace process possible in Northern Ireland was actually the background secularisation of Ireland. I don't think that it would have been possible to establish power sharing between Republicans and Unionists in a generation of, certainly in my father's generation, at a time when Republican attitudes were infused by a sense of Catholicism and a conviction of the one true faith. And I don't think that would have been possible among Unionists who really believed, as Ian Paisley and many others did, that all Catholics were going to hell because they weren't even Christians. I think we have seen some very, very odd things within that whole thing. I mean, for me, the oddest thing that I ever saw was the Harryville protest, and the good Christian people who came along to support the Catholics in the church against the protest wouldn't actually go into the church because they thought they would be contaminated if they did. But and also the kind of arguments that we've heard here that that the retraction of the welfare state and the growth of faith schools, also the influx of ethnic groups and new religious forces into Ireland, and will produce not a continuation of the old division between Catholic and Protestant and the infusion of religion into identity and national identity, but a whole new mix of arguments around things that we don't even anticipate yet. But it will be the contest between secularism and a wide range of religious ideas. When you see in England that the police are having to arrest Hindu fathers for the forced marriage of their daughters, or that they're having to police African and Islamic communities to prevent the mutilation of children, then you get a taste of what is to come in Ireland, and the kind of format within which the argument between secularism and religion will be pitched in the future. I think that's coming towards fascinating and contentious times, and at least I hope to witness them and write about them and come back and debate them again. About all you wonderful humanists. Thank you all. Vote for us.
Thank our speakers, we can thank them more fully at the end, but to put the motion to the floor, religion has poisoned politics on this island. All those in favour, put up your hands.
See you for a while.